We are right around the corner from stablecoin legislation going live in the United States and making RLUSD the premier stablecoin for the entire world. But I'm not sure people truly understand just how important this actually is for XRP. In this video, I want to break that down and show you why stablecoin legislation coming to the United States is one of the biggest catalysts we can have for XRP moving forward. Guys, this is really going to help you understand the core utility of XRP, so make sure to stick around for this whole thing. Like always, your support means so much to this channel. Thank you to everyone who takes the time to like these videos and subscribe to the channel. These two simple things really do help me out so much. Also, if you have a good place to buy some XRP, make sure to check out my favorite exchange uphold down in the description of this video. With that said, let's jump right into it, and I hope you guys enjoy the content. So guys, I want to start out this video and cover something pretty interesting that's taking place right now, and that's that XRP has flipped Ethereum on fully diluted market cap. Now, it's important to realize that in my opinion, fully diluted market cap is actually a better market cap calculation than the traditional market cap calculation. And fully diluted market cap just means that they're using the entire 100 billion supply to calculate XRP's market cap. And as you can see right here, if you do that, XRP actually has a higher market cap than Ethereum. But you're probably wondering, why would you use the 100 billion supply of XRP? If Ripple's still holding a lot of XRP in escrow, why would that count towards the market cap? Well, at the end of the day, it's really important that every XRP has already been issued on the XRP ledger. It's not like these tokens don't exist yet. These tokens were already issued on the XRP ledger, and now they're just being held by Ripple. It's no different than Satoshi holding 1 million Bitcoin. It's no different than the Ethereum whales who purchased Ethereum in an ICO holding Ethereum. It's no different than the Ethereum Foundation holding ETH. It's no different than Vitalik holding ETH. But for some reason, both Bitcoin and Ethereum use Satoshi's wallets in their normal market cap calculation. They use the Ethereum ICO tokens in Ethereum's market cap calculation. But then when you go over to XRP, they don't use Ripple's tokens. They don't use the escrow. So it doesn't make any sense to have a fair comparison on market cap if you're taking tokens out of the calculation in XRP's case, but using tokens that are in a very similar scenario in the calculation for these other networks. So I think the most straightforward way to look at it is just how many tokens are there, right? How many tokens are issued on the network? And if you take that calculation, which would be the fully diluted market cap, XRP has a higher market cap than Ethereum. In my opinion, this is the best way to do the calculation because it just makes it super simple. You don't have to go factor out all these different wallets, factor out all these different people. How many tokens are there and what's the price of the token? Multiply those two numbers and you get the market cap of the network. In my opinion, the XRP ledger does have a higher market cap than Ethereum because we have a set number of XRP. Ethereum's market cap is always inflating. So not only do they count every token in existence for the Ethereum chain and not for the XRP ledger, but also Ethereum's constantly printing more tokens and inflating its market cap. It's just a total backwards calculation not to use the entire issuance of the token. And I just want to point this out because I think we're going to see XRP actually flip Ethereum on both metrics. But I think it's also really important to understand that sometimes people are really paying attention to what is, in my opinion, slightly manipulated rankings, and people always just go to CoinMarketCap and say these are the rankings of the tokens, but they don't actually think about how that ranking is calculated. In my opinion, if you actually think about how the ranking should be calculated, you can very easily come to a scenario or very easily come to an understanding that XRP should have a higher market cap than Ethereum, and in fact, already does. Now, I want to move on and talk about stablecoins because I believe this is going to be a really big thing moving forward, and we have a ton of momentum on stablecoins right now. We actually had a senator actually quote tweet Brad Garlinghouse the other day, talking about how important this stablecoin legislation is. And I think a lot of people are seeing this stablecoin legislation saying, okay, well, this is cool, it's a step forward, but why is this really that important for XRP, right? Why does it matter so much that we have stablecoins? Like, they're not using XRP, they're just using stablecoins. And I think it's really important to understand something critical about stablecoins. Stablecoins are not going to run on their own networks, right? Stablecoins are issued assets on public blockchains. So All of these different stablecoin bills are going to allow different companies, institutions, and governments to actually issue a stablecoin on a public network. So you can't just issue a stablecoin to nowhere. It needs to be issued on a public network. And then you have to run the calculation, right? Where is that stablecoin going to be issued, right? Where would you issue a stablecoin? Well, you essentially have two good options, right? You either have the XRP ledger or you have Ethereum. You issue on Ethereum, then you kind of have some issues. First of all, it's slow and expensive, right? No one really wants to issue a stablecoin on a network where to move $1, you have to pay $15. Like, that's a problem. The other thing about Ethereum that not a lot of people talk about is the issue with smart contracts. Essentially, what we're seeing right now is that you can actually put a malicious smart contract on an Ethereum wallet that could act as a drainer. These are going to be huge issues for financial institutions who want security. They're also going to want to make sure that if money goes to the wrong place, they can claw it back. And these kinds of things can't be done on Ethereum. They can be done on the XRP ledger. Since its inception, Ripple has always taken an approach of that the XRP ledger needs to be a compliance-first network. You need to have things like decentralized ID. You have to have things like clawbacks. Now, these things can be optional to add to a token, but the option needs to be there, right? You can't tell a banking institution, oh, well, sorry, we just don't do things that way, so you're going to have to adjust to our system. No, Ripple said since the early days, hey, we need to make this system applicable for these banking institutions, so if they want to come in and issue a stablecoin, they can do that, and we're not going to sit there and tell them like, oh, sorry, our network doesn't have those capabilities, right? That's a non-starter for most big financial institutions. The other thing we know is Ripple already has other products these financial institutions are going to need. Things like custody, right? Most of these big financial institutions, a stablecoin is just part of the journey. They still need to figure out custody. So if they went over to the Ethereum network, what are they going to do? Run everything through MetaMask? Probably not, right? It's probably going to take a little bit more of an interaction between someone like a Bank of America and the actual network, someone in the middle to kind of help out the process, right? They don't really know anything about this blockchain technology. They need someone to help them out, help structure the product, help custody it, and just build an all-inclusive service around building a stable coin out. And that's where Ripple fits into the equation perfectly. They can help bridge the gap. They can help make these things happen in a way that the company who's issuing the stablecoin actually wants it to happen. And you're probably thinking, so these companies are going to issue their own stablecoins. They're not even going to use RLUSD. Of course, some are going to issue their own stablecoin. If I'm running my own bank, right, and I have trillions of dollars under management and I need a stablecoin, I'm just going to make my own stablecoin. I'm going to put it on the network that makes the most sense. If I'm a really small banking institution and I don't really have the money or the means to go spin up a stablecoin, I'll just use RLUSD but until I become big enough to go use my own. So what the XRP ledger does is provide flexibility. If I'm a large banking institution, I'm not going to put the entire risk of my company on Ripple's balance sheet. It just doesn't make any sense. I'll just spin up my own stablecoin. I have my own balance sheet. But if I'm a small, lean fintech provider and I don't really have deposits, RLUSD might be the way to go. So it's all about providing optionality for these people to get into the cryptocurrency market and making sure all the tools are available to them so that when they get involved, they can take whatever path works best for them. Whether they have their own stablecoin issued on the network or they used RLUSD, both of these pathways give these institutions the capability to have instant dollar-denominated liquidity on a public blockchain and give them options to do it compliantly. Now, there's something else very interesting about this entire thing, and that's where XRP fits into the equation. A lot of people always ask me, this is just stablecoins, right? You issue all these stablecoins on the XRP ledger, and then you don't need XRP, right? What does XRP even do in this entire equation if everyone just wants to use stablecoins? And I think people need to go back to the bigger picture of exactly what XRP is. In the early days, Ripple used XRP as a payments token, right? Moving XRP from one place to another for payments. But it's really important to understand that at its core, XRP is not really a payments token. It's a liquidity token. It's native, neutral, decentralized liquidity for the XRP ledger. And this is exactly where XRP fits into this stablecoin world. Because at the end of the day, you can have a whole bunch of stablecoins, but if there's no liquidity between the stablecoins, you're back in the same issue we already have in the financial system today. Everyone has all these different currencies. There's bad liquidity between the different currencies, and you're in a separated, segregated financial system. But this is where XRP solves the problem. Take a look at what the difference is between the network or the financial network today versus what it could be if we had XRP as a global bridge currency. Even if every single one of these nations right here all had their own stable coins, what you can see is you still have to create global liquidity between each of those different stable coins. It creates a very complex net or a very complex interlinking web between all these different financial institutions to one another. And it doesn't really make sense to need a system like that because all you really need is a single piece of liquidity in the middle connecting all these different currencies. And if that liquidity is decentralized and neutral and is a function of the XRP ledger itself, then suddenly, simply by connecting to the XRP ledger, you have instantaneous liquidity to any other asset on the ledger. This is the paradigm shift that XRP solves. Rather than being stuck in a system where you have to create siloed separate liquidity between every other asset in the entire world, the XRP ledger takes a much different approach. XRP is liquid to everything. You become liquid to XRP. You're instantaneously liquid to everything else on the network. So what stablecoin legislation is going to do is allow all these financial institutions to actually start operating on the XRP ledger, start issuing their own dollar-denominated units in these ecosystems. And what that does is it puts XRP in this position of being a liquidity facilitator, allowing XRP to facilitate global liquidity for people going from one stable coin to the next, from one asset to the next, from one debt instrument to the next, from the stock market to the equity market, to the derivatives market, to the stablecoin market, to the currency market, right? It allows XRP to be at the middle of all of it. So rather than having to create all those separate siloed, essentially, connections of liquidity, you don't need to do that. You don't have to connect to every single asset. You just put XRP in the middle and make that the neutral, decentralized liquidity for everything on this system. That is the financial system I believe we're heading into. And I believe stablecoin legislation and the idea of real world assets finally being able to actually be issued on these public blockchains is how we get there. The financial system we're headed into is going to be built directly into the internet. It's going to be native. And that's what stablecoin legislation allows for. It allows the traditional financial system to start getting moved to the decentralized financial system. And from there, the only thing you have to try to draw a conclusion to is which decentralized system is going to win. In my opinion, it's going to be the XRP ledger. And I talked about this extensively in the beginning. But Ripple has already built the trusted connections with these centralized financial institutions to make them comfortable with issuing their centralized products, their centralized assets on a decentralized network. These financial institutions are not ready to do it themselves. And Ripple is a very, very professional corporate company who can help them get access to the XRP ledger. That is one of the primary reasons I think the XRP ledger is going to win, because Ripple has the connections to make it happen. I say this all the time. I could spin up my own network tomorrow. No one's going to use it because I don't have the connections. Not only is the XRP ledger built properly to handle this next generation financial system, but Ripple has the connections to actually make it happen. Guys, thank you so much for coming. I hope you enjoyed this update. And for now, Mickle out.